Hi, welcome to the Vendor Resource Timesheets Submission Video Session. Staffing organization route administrators generate timesheets either in manual or automatic mode. Timesheets are generated for all the resource types and for all their deployments, available as of the date of timesheet generation. Upon generation, resources including the vendor resources get the generated timesheets in their respective portals. The resources are supposed to fill in the timesheets and submit for getting approval. Timesheets submission user interface is a dashboard which provides an end-to-end view of the timesheet workflow to the vendor resources from submission to approval. Click on Timesheet Submission menu item to get to the user interface for Timesheet Submission dashboard. As you see, there are 4 nodes in the timesheets workflow: Open Rejected, Self, Open Rejected, Proxy, Submitted Resubmitted, and Approved. The nodes represent the states of the timesheets in the workflow. Vendor resources can see the timesheets in a state by clicking on the corresponding tab. Let's look into the Open Rejected, Self node. Upon generation, timesheets are in open state by default. These open timesheets for the vendor resource appear in this node. A submitted timesheet may be rejected by an approver. In this node, also the rejected timesheets for the vendor resource appear as they need to be resubmitted. The timesheet status column shows open or rejected accordingly. The word self in the node name signifies that the timesheets in this node will be handled by the vendor resources themselves. You have possibly noticed that the vendor resources timesheets are highlighted in brown with a note in submission grace period. WFMA implemented 2 behavioral control parameters: timesheet submission allowed period and timesheet submission grace period. The value for the parameters is declared and maintained by the staffing organization route administrator. See the WFMA staffing organization registration video session for details. Timesheet submission allowed period means a resource should submit the timesheet within the submission allowed period. From the point of a timesheet is generated for a resource, WFMA keeps sending automatic email reminding the resource to submit the timesheet through the submission allowed period. During submission allowed period, the timesheet is highlighted in yellow color. Timesheet submission grace period becomes effective beyond the submission allowed period. If a resource does not submit timesheet within the submission allowed period, the resource is expected to submit the timesheet within the submission grace period. When the timesheet is in the submission grace period, the timesheet is highlighted in brown color. There are 2 action points against each timesheet: action trail and entry and submit. Let me explain entry and submit first. By clicking the entry and submit link, the vendor resource gets to the user interface for timesheet entry. As you see, the top portion of the user interface shows the timesheet header information. The bottom portion is for filling in date-wise working hours, leave hours, and comments. The dates in the timesheet are derived by WFMA on the basis of many factors like timesheet start date, deployment start date, timesheet cycle as per the contract, etc. Click on the pencil icon against a date. Notice that the working hours, leave hours, and comments fields become editable for taking entries. Please note that the resources do not have to fill in timesheet hours for all the dates in one go. The vendor resource can progress his work intermittently. Enter some values in the fields. Click on the tick icon to save the entry for the date. Click on Continue Later button for continuing the work later. Click on the Entry and Submit link for continuing with the timesheet entries. The vendor resource can go back to modify any entries made earlier also. When the vendor resource is sure that he has completed the timesheet entry, he clicks on the Submit button to save the entries and submit the timesheet. Note that upon submission, the timesheet disappears from the Open Rejected Self node. Click on the Submitted Resubmitted tab to see the timesheet appeared here. Now the timesheet will appear in the approver's portal, that is the client root administrator of the project, Export MIS. The vendor resource waits for the approval now. Note that the staffing organization root administrator observes the progress of timesheet submission in his portal as well. It may so happen that due to the unavailability of the vendor resource, due to any reason, the timesheet submission is getting delayed. In that case, the staffing organization root administrator may assign a proxy to submit the timesheet, who is the vendor resource's immediate reporting authority. If a proxy is assigned, the timesheet would appear in the Open Rejected Proxy node. Upon filling in and submitting the timesheet by the proxy, the same way the vendor resource would do, the timesheet would appear in the Submitted Resubmitted node. Suppose that the approver for the timesheet, the client root administrator of the project, Export MIS, has rejected the timesheet with some reason. Get to the Open Rejected Self tab in the Vendor Resource portal. The timesheet reappears in the Open Rejected Self node after rejection. Notice that the timesheet status is now Rejected instead of Open. Vendor Resource checks the approver's note on rejection in the approver status. The vendor resource corrects the entry as per the rejection note and resubmits. The timesheet now appears in the Submitted Resubmitted node. Suppose this time the approver approves the timesheet. Get to the Approved tab in the Vendor Resource portal. The timesheet after approval appears in this tab, now showing status Approved. Let me explain Action Trail in this node. Vendor resources can see the action trail of the timesheets in each node also. Action Trail provides the complete detail about a specific timesheet and its journey towards approval. Click on the Action Trail link to get to the user interface. As you see, the top portion of the user interface shows the timesheet header information. The vendor resource can download the timesheet in PDF format. Click on Timesheet Items accordion link to see the timesheet items for day-wise work and leave time entry. Click on the Timesheet Approvers and Approval Status accordion link to see the details including approval status, approval date, and approval comment. Click on the Timesheet Approval Actions accordion link to see the trail of the actions the timesheet has gone through. You can see the actions sequentially since submission. Thank you. See you in the next video.